So you took the Dexedrine, right? Dexedrine.
Dexamphetamine.
Uh,
I had it a bit late, but I was like exhausted today, and then it got to the point where I should take it, or like had to take it just to function. And then I was like, I can take another one to be extra awake, but I'm not going to sleep, and I need some sleep because I've had some bad sleep the last couple of days. So I left it. I'm a little tired, but luckily we went on earlier anyway, so it's worked out well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
are we live
I
now?
think, yep, we're live again. Here we go
we're live,
again.
All right. Sorry, people. This has been a very, very embarrassing podcast. We're trying to get all this stuff worked out, but we're just gonna roll through with it. And I feel terrible for people who are watching, but it's okay. We're gonna get through this.
They're our most treasured followers, whoever put
Your mic is
Yeah, I can't really hear you,
bro.
Hello. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello.
Okay, well, I'll just continue right now. So what we were talking about before, let's see if this works out. Trip Whip was talking about his acid trip where he ran naked into the street, got arrested, and then we were talking about going into the police station. So let's see if we can get through this and hopefully finish the story.
That's right. There's not okay. So I think for me, with the trip, it's kind of weird how it like worked out well. Like I don't even remember paying the hospital bill, or the ambulance bill. The police, like nothing came of it. I wasn't, no charges were put against me. I just felt like embarrassed, obviously, the next day waking up, and I kind of felt betrayed by psychedelics a little bit because, like during the trip, they told me that I was going to enter this white light. But as I said to you, as I was in the ambulance, I was getting to this point where I was just able to think in binary code. I was trying to like break through this binary code and think of something other than 0 and 1, but I couldn't. It was literally just all I was thinking is 0, 1, 0, 1 for ages. And that was like the end of the trip, basically. The next thing I know is I'm waking up in hospital next to my friend. But I think for me, what made the trip like pretty interesting, and it kind of changed my perspective a lot on time and all sorts of stuff, was during like the peak of the acid trip, my inner voice had already disconnected to me. It felt like it was, another entity or another being speaking with me. And it was saying that, you're about to enter this white light and it's going to be, one of the most intense experiences of your life. And it started to like scare me a bit. And I asked the voice, can I bring my friend with me, the friend who gave me the LSD, the friend who I was tripping with at that time. And the voice was like, yeah, that's okay. You can bring whoever you want. And it was very specific. It was like, but once you go back inside your room, sit on your couch, you're going to turn into this white light, which never happened. Or at least it didn't happen during the trip. So that's why I was feeling betrayed. But 2 weeks later, I did DMT for my first time. And I was with my friend, Aiden, sitting on the couch, had this massive dose. And sure enough, I kind of met with all these entities again, the same entities that I seemed to be talking to that night on LSD, and they took me to the white light. I had that white light experience, the exact one that they seemed to be describing. And then when I came out of the trip, or at least when I came out of the white light, I was again running through the street naked, and I was like, oh man, wow. This is just something that keeps happening, But then it turned out to be the case that I was inside a memory, and I was just like completely present inside this memory. So to the point that it felt like it was happening, in the moment. It was as real as this moment right now. And it just made me feel like these trips, they're almost like they take you to a place outside of this sober reality, or this sober like time. What would you say? This realm of time or something like that. And so it just felt like I'd gone from LSD, and they said, we're going to take you into this white light. And then, that's where I was taken to. It just happened to be in sober reality. I was following this narrative of I had to take LSD, and then to get all the way to DMT, to the white light, I had to take DMT. But yeah, I'd say that was probably one of the craziest trips I had.
Did you ever have any
definitely sounds crazy.
Can you hear me now, by the way?
Go on.
Am I all right?
I can hear you fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank the Lord. Well, I was going to say, did you ever have any sort of like religious upbringing or anything? Did you ever like hear of like white light stuff before you had this experience? Was that the first time you'd ever come across something like that?
As far as I know, I mean, I'd probably seen like, on TV, cartoon representations of people dying and going to
Yeah.
heaven, and heaven seems to
Hmm.
be like a bright place. But very like, the specific going into a white light, that's nothing I'd really heard of before. I had gone to religious schools, but only in like primary school. And there was no, as far as I can remember, there's no like descriptions of white light or anything like that.
No.
So yeah, and my parents were like atheists. So no, as far as I know, there wasn't any like real, specific lesson about when you die, you're going to enter this white light or anything like that.
Because obviously before we cut off before, I said I'd literally had more or less the same experience as you, just a different setting, different flavour, all the same aspects, people beckoning me to come towards it, me literally being naked, running towards it. And the thing about getting naked, I've seen it, obviously since I watched your video, that really inspired me. I was like, I need to find all these other people who've ran around naked on acid to try and figure it out. And there's a big element of, even in that moment when I can recall any time when I've done something like that, it's like shedding. It's almost like shedding your skin, isn't it? Like taking off. Why do I actually have these clothes? And why I got rid of all my possessions. Like I threw my phone, I threw my wallet away, and because I was very much in the moment, being like, well, I'm gonna die, so I don't need these things. So symbolically, you sort of rid yourself of all this material stuff, and obviously you don't actually die, and before you know it, you've been arrested.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's the weird thing is like, I think for me at that time, I didn't have the same motivation to take off my clothes. And I've like talked to quite a few people who have had a very similar experience where they've, stripped naked and run through their street. And it seems like a lot of people have this similar motivation of feeling just absolutely free, or like they feel uncomfortable in the clothes. But it is strange. Like there seems to be like some pull to, for some reason, there's like this subconscious like motivation for us to get naked. But for me, it was different. For me, it was like, I was having this dialogue in my mirror, and I was saying to myself, it's all me. Like I never realized it, but I'm just giving my power, feeling social anxiety and not being myself, because I'm giving my power to aspects of me. Everybody else at this moment felt like they were just a creation of my mind. And it was in that way very liberating, because like I'm not going to not be me when I'm by myself. So why am I not going to be me in front of aspects of myself? So then I was like, well, watch this. I'm going to strip naked and just, do the thing that would otherwise cause me the most shame, and I'm going to feel absolutely fine. So that was my motivation during it.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
it's a little bit different, even though we ended up doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that's
very weird.
It is. I think everyone's got. Obviously, we're all wired up differently, and we have our own different values. And yeah, I completely get why you do that in that moment as well, because I could see myself. If I got naked again, probably be another justification for doing so. And yeah, for me, it was there was a bit of that sort of like shamelessness, where I thought, right, well, if I'm not bothered about anything right now in this state, so then I project that onto all the other consciousnesses, the bubbles of experience, because like, why would they be bothered if I'm not bothered, if I am them, getting like super non-dual. But obviously you're always going to come back to this 3D separate realm, aren't you, where people are like, whoa, I don't want to see a guy running around naked losing his mind, because they have no idea what's going on with you at all. Because I mean, when I got arrested, they asked me what drugs I'd done, and instead of being honest, I just told them every drug I'd ever taken in my whole life. So they couldn't get they must have just thought I had schizophrenia or something. But I had to it was really bizarre having interactions with the police, because I think they sort of wanted to charge me for indecent exposure, or just being a lunatic. And I had to basically lie and say that I didn't consciously choose to take the the substance that made me get naked. I just had to say, "Oh, I got spiked at the rave," because I thought that this sounds a bit more innocent, and then they were a bit more understanding, even though I had to lie. They should have just been understanding on a level. I mean, you can't help it when these things happen. We should have more compassion for people who go crazy on psychedelics, because it's like can completely derail your whole life. But I guess police in Manchester, where I was at, especially where on the Curry Mile, this super chaotic place, I guess they deal with stuff like that all the time, if not worse. So probably another day on the
Yeah.
job for
Well,
them.
Police being understanding, I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, probably not. They were what were
Yeah.
they like
Like,
to you, the police? How did
you
they
just
treat
like-
how did they treat you when you got arrested? Do you remember any interactions with them?
So I have no idea. That's why I'm surprised you were as with it as you were. I was, for me, they weren't like humans anymore. They were, what would you, like they were the machine elves themselves. And so they were kind of like saying to me, like, great job, like you figured it out and you're handling it really well, you know. Like that's literally what I thought they were telling me. But apparently they told my friend that, you know, he's okay, don't stress, he'll be all right. And you know, we're just gonna take him to the hospital and then he should be let go in the morning. So obviously here in Australia,
That's quite nice.
they're very chill about this sort of thing. And yeah, they've probably seen it quite a few times. I mean,
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
for
I
me,
can't imagine what it's like over there.
I think for me, they'd seen it so many times, people going crazy, that there was a lack of compassion, which I understood in hindsight. Because obviously they did treat me like crap, like they throw me around, and I was going crazy. I was like, "What the hell is going on?" So I was naked, of course, and I was like, "Yeah," just empathizing with them. Like it must have been very hard to deal with, but also the British attitudes are very much like we're quite a stereotypically like glum country, and it's like, oh, everyone's mental, this guy's gone crazy, oh, do I have to deal with all this BS? So I understood it. The only one who was pretty sound to me was this the lady police officer, and I intuited that in the moment. I was like, oh, this woman's got more of the feminine, compassionate, caring energy. I think she's seen a bit more of the darkness of what's actually going on.
She's like a
with me.
mom figure.
Yes, she
She's
was.
like a mom sort of
And
thing.
I immediately gravitated towards her because, like I say, when I was getting chased by the police, I was interpreting them. I didn't even know the police. I thought I was getting chased down by like human traffickers or something. I remember getting like taken down.
right.
Taken down by this sort of like quite large police woman, and I thought I thought she was dragging me off to some sweatshop or something to go and harvest my organs, because in that moment, you know, in psychedelics they're so receptive to your thoughts that the inner world becomes the outer world. There was no, when I even looked at her, there was no police. There was no police uniform on her at all. She looked like she'd just come out of like, yeah, again, like a butcher's like sweatshop or something, harvesting humans. And then 20 minutes later, when I sort of came down, or however long later it was, I looked at her again and saw that it was a police officer. So it just shows you how interlinked the mind is with constructing like the physical space. And I've never been the same since then, and I bet you've changed a lot since that experience.
Yeah, how did it go for you after that? With when you know what? How many years ago was this? By the way,
For me or Vivek?
Yeah, for you.
This is a long time ago. I think it was probably like maybe 8 years ago now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or maybe actually no, probably like 7 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. But it at first actually like I became like quite depressed after. I remember even though my DMT trip that was like 2 weeks after seemed to show me that, you know, they hadn't betrayed me. I did end up seeing the white light just like they had said, or at least like the voice had said. I did still feel like, you know, I'd lost control and I'd gone so much further than I'd expected, and I did something that sabotaged my sober reality. And so I still couldn't trust, you know, psychedelics in general. And at that point I was tripping a lot. So I felt like I lost a bit of my identity because I had to step back from tripping for a while. And, you know, I was embarrassed. The house I was in, everybody had seen me naked and lose my crap. So like all these neighbors who I'd known for years just wouldn't look at me. And
Damn.
I felt very lost for a good, probably a year, I'd say, just because
Wow.
it kind of this path of having to do a lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-work. Why did I end up here? But now in hindsight, I look back and I realized that it really did affect the way I looked at reality philosophically. Even though at the time I think I was experiencing, some depression, which was kind of clouding my judgment and making me forget. When I started again venturing into trips and having all these flashbacks from that night, it gave me more clarity on what I'd learned, and I did start to see the outside world more as a projection of my mind, or at least more of it is hallucinated than I realize when I'm sober. And so I started to regain some power and started to actually integrate the lessons I was learning, which is things like you could do anything you want, which sounds very wish-washy and very cliche, but it inspired me to start just pursuing these basic things that I always wanted for myself, that I always told myself, I couldn't achieve or didn't deserve or whatever. And I think from that set me up to being on a path to the happiest version of myself. It was probably maybe a couple of years after that trip that I found myself living the happiest version of my life, and I was happier than I'd probably ever been in my life.
And it's what led you.
I would say of that.
It's what led you into this Discord
Right,
call right now, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So you basically had to sacrifice like that 1 year of your life to now you have like this, I wouldn't say endless happiness, but you have more of a awareness of yourself and how to be happy. And it's crazy that like this happened, you said 6 to 8 years ago, that you are still like, you're not reading off of something that on the screen where your trip happened. Like you're doing this from memory. You have all these things about the trip. You could probably go on for a lot longer too about it. And it's just like, so that's still in your mind, this trip. That it's just like, it's one of the biggest events in your life. That's how I see it, at least.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I think I'd be very surprised if I ever forgot the details that I remember today.
Yeah.
Like each one just seemed so significant, so profound, and something so beyond what I thought was possible to experience. And right now I do treasure it. Like I look at it as an absolute gift, something that I'm just so grateful I was able to experience. I see a lot, because I did have a lot of mental health stuff at the time. And I think that was actually part of the whole year, as well as this trip forced me to face that stuff. And I'm not exactly sure how it made it happen, but it just kind of uncorked all these feelings I'd suppressed. And so it was unpleasant, but that was what was required for me to then, actually start feeling emotions, including positive emotions, and stop being numb. But I know there's a lot of people who haven't had these sort of experiences, who are kind of caught in.
Haven't had it.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't say I'd recommend running around naked, but you do in retrospect. Like we say, any of these like super challenging experiences, even sober, I don't know, anything like you're going in a car crash or something happens to you, like anything that forces you to sort of reflect on like, whoa, almost like the brutal aspect of life. It does force you to change, doesn't it? Because before I had that experience, the naked escapade, I was like stuck in a loop of just stuck in like this ego loop of just creating a shitty reality for myself, and I really did need something like extreme to break me out of it. And like you said, I was well depressed for ages and scared me from psychedelics, but now looking back, it was the most transformative thing that's ever happened to me. And like you say, I'll never forget about it. And actually, I don't know about you, but I whenever I reflect on it, because I literally think about it all the time, and I'll unpack even more details of it and little qualities that may have got lost. Like I remembered a few months ago, because a lot of people ask me about it on here and then just in real life, because I'm very open about it, and as you are as well. And I think that's the way to go. Just be open and get it all out there. And as I explain the story to people, from the literal first hour of waking up on that day to the end of it, I remember little details that I forgot about, because I remember at one point I woke up, I started having like blackouts, so I'd be running towards a white light, sort of like everything becomes, it sort of dissipates, but then I rematerialise, and I was in a corner shop, and I was just stood there naked, and I just took a can off the shelf and started drinking this fizzy drink. And then that's when I woke up, and then this guy came out with a broom and was like, attacking me with a broom. So obviously I had to run out there, and I didn't remember that till years later. And I thought I'd made it up, but then when you
Right.
really reflect, and you're like, no, I actually was there in that moment. So who knows what else I did that night?
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. Like, it actually took me quite a few trips to remember most of the details, and that's what made me question if they were like authentic details. One of them being like I'd completely forgotten this feeling of people filming me. Like I could sense around me that there were cameras on me, and it just seemed like everything was being broadcast to the world somehow. And that was a detail I'd completely forgotten. And in a future trip, I seemed to remember it, and the memory was extremely vivid and all the rest of it, but I still questioned, well, did this second trip kind of corrupt my memories or something? But then when I looked online and started researching these other people's chosen person experiences and naked runs through the street, this detail of being filmed came up quite a lot, which is why like for me, I started describing it as the Truman Show effect, because that's what it felt like. It feels like you're waking up
Hmm.
and realizing you're on the Truman Show and everybody has been in on this weird
Right.
joke. Yeah.
Right, I get that too a lot. Like, or when you not just with psychedelics, but when I smoke weed, I'm just like I don't know if this happens to you guys, but it when I would smoke and I got very paranoid, I started thinking like people are just doing this, like they're being my friend or something, just to like be part of that Truman Show thing where you're just like
Yeah.
you're living in your own space and these people are just actors and stuff who are around you, or trying to
Mm,
like, or pretending to be your friend or something. Like, yeah, it's crazy how
interesting.
Yeah, that's why I loved
drugs can
your
alter your mind. Like,
I loved your video on the Truman Show effect, because it was again another thing that I was trying to articulate about my experience of the all eyes being on you, and it was interesting to again to
Mm,
see that other people have that exact experience, and it almost in the moment it feels very sinister and malicious, but looking back on it, there almost is like this sort of cosmic joke to it, almost like the universe is having a laugh with you and seeing how much you can handle. And obviously, in the moment, there's always going to be
right.
retaliation from the ego, isn't there? The ego loves to misconstrue so much stuff about your life, doesn't it? I mean,
mhm,
it's the root cause of all your bullshit, isn't it? Your ego, your separate, limited mind, and again, you hit the nail on the head. After you come out of these crazy experiences that defy reality, or your idea of it, you do realize, yes, you can do everything. Like, you always have a choice, and you're always in control. Like, I can't go. I can't go to the moon as of tomorrow. But if I really wanted to put my mind to it, I could actually probably become an astronaut, couldn't I? Like, realistically, like, if because you've really just got to put work. You got to put work and time and effort in and everything. And I guess that's how I got into the YouTube as well, where it's just
Yes.
it took a few years. Things take time, don't they? In this 3D
Yeah.
physical space. But yeah, you need that sort
Yeah.
of
It's
awakening.
it's a strange thing. I, I feel like almost like when I was having that experience, that like Truman Show effect, the extent to the outside world's change and how much changed blew me away. I was like, if this shouldn't be possible, because if the outside world is this like objective thing that I'm just receiving, then it shouldn't be so malleable. I shouldn't be able to experience it in such a altered way. And it was extremely different to how this world functions when I'm sober. And that made me think, or kind of reflect on the message of like you can do anything you want. It was kind of like at that moment I felt so free and so liberated, and I accepted myself for who I was, just to such an extreme extent that the outside world conformed to my perception. And it was like everybody was coming out and celebrating with me, and I was completely like present, but nothing seemed off about the experience. Like, it didn't seem like some guy was angry, but I was interpreting him as this guy who was celebrating with me. No, like, I could literally see everybody walking out of their houses with smiles on their faces, coming up, hugging me, saying words of affirmation. And it just made me think, if that's possible in that moment, maybe when I'm sober and I get to this point where I'm just completely accepting myself, and I'm, extremely happy, the outside world conforms to my feelings, and it
mhm.
just kind of creates this narrative that runs alongside it, and it's like, you've just won the lottery, and then everybody's celebrating around me or whatever. It's like I hallucinate a scenario that backs up my mind.
Yeah, well, it's like it's the law of attraction, isn't it? It's very real, even on like a scientific, just normal basis. You get what you give out of reality. If you act, again, it ties in with karma as well. You put in good stuff into the world, and you oftentimes get good stuff out of it. If you act like a devil, eventually karma boomerangs around, and you get taught serious life lessons. But then the ego can sort of misconstrue this. I know that I have done as well in the past when I was like super spiritual, got into, so I was treating like this karmic sort of idea as a game, almost like Sims or whatever. Like, I put all these points into like the good personality and the good things to do, and I'll get these good things out of it. Then that's the ego. That's actually even more devilish than just being a devil, isn't it? Because you're masquerading as being a good person, trying to get good things to give you these like rewards, the pleasure. You've got to be very aware of that, haven't you? And that's I say, like, on the channel right now, I'm very much trying to let people know that yes, psychedelics are super profound and can change your life, but you've got to work with them. They won't just do the work for you automatically. If you don't integrate it, and in fact, if you misconstrue it, it can make you even worse. It's very serious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing, is they like change your perspective on life so much that I think a lot of people don't want to. They half integrate it, and that half integration can be more damaging than just disregarding it completely, because it could give you this let's say the Truman Show effect, one feeling that you have in it, which sounds super egotistical, but like I'll explain in a second. I'm sure you relate to it. It's like you feel like a chosen person, but it's not that you feel like in this world you are the chosen person and everybody else isn't. It's like, no, you've connected with that part of you that remembers what a human being really is, and that is this thing that's connected to this divine consciousness. At least that's what it feels like in the moment, or that's what it felt like for me. And so in that, you feel united with everybody else. You feel everybody else has this consciousness, and if you are there, you can actually see it inside of them, and you're not talking to their egos anymore. You're talking to yourself in different vessels. But if you half integrate this message, because the full integration is more empathy. That's what it ended up doing for me. I was like, well, at that time I was very nihilistic, very selfish, very arrogant, and I didn't treat other people with respect. But when I saw that everybody else was really just like me, but living a different life, or just they had the same soul, but were having a different life experience, it gave me a much deeper level of empathy, to the point where, I can at least not condemn somebody who otherwise I would have just thought is an evil person. But if I were to half integrate it, which I did initially, it gives you a bigger ego. And I can imagine that you would actually start thinking, well, I'm the chosen person. Like I had this experience that, showed me I'm better than other people. I don't know, however you could interpret it, and then that would further isolate you, make you more apathetic, and distance you from other people, which I feel like is the opposite of what that trip is trying to promote.
Yeah, and you have a choice, don't you, of which path to choose. That it's leading down the pure path of see yourself in other people, which means you literally cannot judge people at all, and it's hard because obviously we'll always go back to the ego. There's always going to be an element of it, but you can have that. You got to have that awareness, or you can completely misinterpret the trip and become one of these sort of spiritual ego, bellends really, that think they're above everybody. You see a lot of it on YouTube, and I even have empathy for them as well. Like I completely understand it, because I could have gone down that path, and even sort of did in half of a sense. About half of a year integrating the trip was me struggling with, am I the chosen one, or are we all the chosen ones? And it's definitely the latter.
So this next question I have could kind of like integrate what we were just talking about here. Just all your experiences and what psychedelics do to you. What is something that people don't usually talk about psychedelics that is like very underrated too, like not like something that just you get a lot, but it's not talked about enough, and like explain something like that.
I think right now it's probably the bad trips. Like a really common thing to be said in the psychedelic community is there's no such thing as a bad trip.
Hmm.
And like I love that perspective, and I think people who have that perspective are less likely to have a bad trip or a bad experience because the reason they say that is because even a bad trip is really just an opportunity for you to integrate an aspect of your shadow or something like that. It's
Hmm.
an opportunity for you to grow, and that's the mindsets that mindset is required for you to grow and for you to integrate your shadow. But a lot of people are just not there. A lot of people are taking psychedelics to get to that point. They are, depressed, they are struggling, and the reason they have gotten to that place is because they've developed a lot of unhealthy thinking patterns, at least a lot of the time. And so when these people take a psychedelic and they have a difficult experience, which could simply be it's trying to make them, confront an aspect of their
Right, right.
subconscious that they are afraid of, that they don't want anything to do with. If they don't know how to do that and if they're not expecting it to happen, they really can be traumatized and they
Hmm.
really can struggle for a very long period after. Like I was depressed after my trip, and that trip was positive. Like that experience of running through the street naked, there was no negative aspect during that trip. But some people can have a very similar encounter and be left with derealization where nothing in reality feels real. And it's actually extremely common for people to be left with derealization. Nothing feels real. They don't feel like even, they've gotten in touch with this God consciousness or anything. It's just simply reality is hallucinated. And because they're afraid of that feeling during the trip, because everything is changing around them, obviously their sober reality no longer feels real. Well, they start to become afraid. And those thoughts, as you were saying before, Vivek, when you have whatever you're thinking during the trip, that's kind of projected into the outside world, and so then these fears are projected outside of them and they start seeing demonic things. And so they get to this point when they sober up, they've been traumatized from the trip itself, so they're just reeling with trauma. They are left feeling like nothing is real, and they've also got the sense that, well, if anything was real, it would be these demonic things that I was seeing. So I would actually
Yeah.
rather just stay in the place of, existential anxiety, nothing is real. So there's a lot of people who really are left in a like very difficult spot after tripping. And not a lot of people are talking about it. Like I never
Hmm.
had any trips that left me traumatized, that really left me worse off. And because of that, early days on YouTube, I was really only spreading the message of do psychedelics because it can heal you.
Mm.
But since going over to TikTok and just getting in touch with more people in the community, I've heard lots of stories, and they seem to be consistent that there is a dark side of psychedelics. It normally happens with people who are younger, who are in high
Hmm.
school still, or only just come out of high school, and they take a dose that was a bit higher than they should have, or they just have a psychedelic when they really shouldn't have because they were not ready for it,
Hmm.
and that they're left in a state of nothing is real. And I'm sort of like I'm contemplating ending my life now because this is just horrible.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
how
think that's
serious it
the
gets.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's something that isn't talked about a lot at all because we do want psychedelics to be researched. There's so much good that can happen, and
Right.
90% of people who do psychedelics have a positive experience and are healed and have a better life because of it. So these stories are getting pushed aside, but for those people who are having these bad trips and dark trips, I mean, I can't imagine how horrible it would be. And so I do think we need to let people know how bad it can be and why it can be bad, so that people who want to venture into this experience, who want to have this trip, are the right people. They hear these really intense experiences. That's why I love what you guys are doing, sharing just extreme experiences. Because when people realize I could have a trip and be inside this place, this realm for hundreds of years, this isn't just a drug that's going to make me enjoy music more. Then you have the right people doing it. Then you have people saying, I actually want to experience that. And if you're thinking you actually want to experience that, being inside the trip for 100 years, there's a very low chance you're going to have a bad trip because you are ready for that sort of experience. You are the sort of person that should be tripping.
I think
So-
sometimes a problem with using psychedelics, for me, and I think a lot of people could relate, is you go sometimes, especially when you're younger as well, you think you've got it all figured out, don't you? You're 18, you're 20. I can take this psychedelic. I've learned how to control it. I'm a veteran. I'm a master. When you're just such an infant, aren't you? You don't have any grand idea of how big your life really is and how much you've got left to realize and mature, and then you get into this mindset of, oh yeah, right, I can do it. And I've noticed when I try to control psychedelics, that's sometimes when I have my worst trips, like my catastrophic trips in a sense, that the running around naked and all the other mental ones I've had. They are in hindsight the best, even though at the time they're the most extreme. My worst trips have been when I've gone to, I talked about this in my one of my newest videos, where I'd gone to a festival or something. Obviously a lot of people take psychedelics recreationally, and I'm like, all right, I'll take acid because I want to have a good time, I want to amplify my enjoyment of this. And even in a sense there's like some shadow element of like, oh, I don't know if I can enjoy this without being on a drug or without being on a psychedelic. And then when you're in the midst of the peak, that's when it can sort of turn around and be like, well, the joke's on you. You don't have control at all. Something just mad can happen, especially when you're at a festival or something, about all these different like variables of what can happen when you're in these like super recreational settings, especially parties and stuff. Like, you just don't know how they're going to go down. Like, even going to a party sober or something, you don't know what's going to happen. Someone could jump out the window, the police could come, there could be a fight. And if you're on psychedelics, that is going to seriously skew your trip big time. Whereas if you're taking it at home, if you're a very experienced psychonaut and you know yourself, like have actual awareness, and you take it at home and you're in very controlled setting, you don't even need to control it, because the trip is just in its perfect environment to suit you, isn't it? So that's why I would say it's fair enough. I think there is a recreational quality of psychedelics that I think, if used well, is awesome. Like, when you use it wisely and like, I'm already having a good time, let's connect even more, I'm ready, take 2CB with your best pals, listen to music, and you feel that everyone else is on that level, that's the perfect time to use it. And it actually transcends being recreational and becomes spiritual. But if you're going to party and just I'm just going to get off my face on loads of 2CB and have some cat and maybe smoke weed, that's when it goes tits up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And
so that what you were just talking about kind of reminds me. I just recently did a video last month where this person, is called the most tragic trip report I've ever read. This where you're not control of your environment. The guy took 7 grams of mushrooms, which is a lot. That's a crazy amount. But he was at this party or something, and he saw someone die. And he was trying to do CPR, and he was like, people were all around him, and they were like all freaking out, and like, just he heard the gunshots and everything, and like, oh man, I just can't imagine what it would be like to see something like that on that high of a psychedelic, especially shrooms, where it's all compressed in those 3 to 6 hours where you're just like peaking. And it's just, oh man, so bad trips can be very different. Like, they can be, inside your mind. Now that's a bad trip that will end up being good in the long run most of the time. But a bad trip where something like that happens, or you're stuck in a thought loop, that's where those are actually bad.
Yes. I mean, even the thought loops can be good. Like, that's the thing, is I think like we need to like share bad trips as well, which often aren't shared because like we want to get this message of psychedelics out there, where we want people to realize that they have so much potential. But there is this weird thing with bad trips where they do seem to want you to like integrate something, and it's sometimes just extremely hard. Like, I read a trip report where a guy was having this thought loop, and it was like traumatizing for him. He was just suffering immensely until he got to like this point where he was able to just ask himself, like, if I'm having this experience where reality seems to be warping around me, then what am I? And maybe I'm a lot more powerful than I thought. And just like that, the trip, like the thought loop ended, and it was like the TV started like celebrating, like the people, the actors broke the fourth wall. They're like, "Great job, you got it."
Okay.
And he just had a beautiful trip. And for myself, like I had a bad trip on a bad trip on mushrooms where I just did everything wrong, and I knew it was wrong. At this point, I was an experienced tripper, or experienced enough to know that you don't just take a high dose of mushrooms on a whim. You don't do the highest dose without preparation. And I was just feeling bored. That was my motivation. I had some mushrooms in my fridge. I ate all of them at once because I had nothing else to do. And then as the effects started to kick in, I was like, I really hope this isn't an intense trip. Like straight away, just resisting the experience. And of course, it was going to be an intense trip. Like it was the highest dose I'd ever done at that point. But it was weird because I was like doing everything to put myself into a bad headspace. But from that bad headspace, I eventually got to this point where I was searching for like the reason why I'm suffering. And it turned out, my best guess is I was like subconsciously orchestrating this like series of actions to put myself into a bad trip because I felt guilty about something I'd done to my friend earlier. Because as soon as I apologized to my friend during that trip, the bad trip just stopped, and it was like everything was like okay.
Wow.
Like all I had to do was recognize the wrong I'd done, apologize, and then the suffering could stop. And I feel like a lot of people may be having these bad trips when and just feeling like they've been betrayed by psychs, when really there's something underneath it that they just weren't able to quite integrate.
You see this in a lot of trip reports where they get a lot of demonic presences emerging, and the ones that come out of it, I've noticed, this is a common thread between them all, is they sort of have to have that moment of clarity, because obviously it will be the hardest thing in your whole life. You see a literal demon in front of you, as physical as I'm seeing this right now, that is going to be the most challenging moment of your whole life. But if you can have that eureka moment where you're like, right, let's look at the demon, like that, let's say like hypothetically look at demon in the eyes and sort of try and, they say like kill it with love, kill it with consciousness. Right. And you notice in them trip reports the devils turn into angels. And I think, have you seen Jacob's Ladder, the film?
I have.
What an amazing film. And that's got a lot of trippy elements to it, sort of very surreal, dreamlike. And obviously towards the end, the guy, is it the chiropractor, he's doing his back, isn't he? And he says like, when you're holding on and you're not letting go, the angels in your life manifest as demons. And I was like, oh, this is so true in a psychedelic trip. And that they're my favorite trips to share. And that's why I love your content as well, Trip Keeper. There's so many, because obviously you do focus on the horror based exploration, but there's so many beautiful positive outcomes at the end of it. It's like so many of them actually end with them being like, you know what, this was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but I wouldn't have given it up for the world because I made it through. Obviously some people don't in the end, like, yeah, I'm literally traumatized, I'm never making it out of this. But and they're important as well, because you got to have the whole spectrum. But my favorite ones are when they experience a literal living nightmare, and they work around it, and it ends up being super constructive for them. I really like that one. I was listening to your latest one last night, the longest one you've read, and obviously that wasn't on a psychedelic, that was on a delirium, wasn't it? And that's just a whole different ballpark. I've said this many times, like if you're wanting to explore altered states, there are much safer substances to use, the classic traditional psychedelics. I wouldn't, obviously, all of us, I don't advocate delirium use at all. I like hearing about it because it's the most entertaining one. I love horror films as well, so actually hearing about, oh my god, literally someone met like the girl off The Ring, and I actually, because I don't know about you, I mean you probably do, when I'm listening to them I literally imagine being them exactly how it is, and that gives me chills, and it's exciting, but then you realise, on a level, like this is super scary stuff. But even with them, like again, you're taking deliriums, which you shouldn't be. But if you've had that experience, that I completely get it, and it probably, even though it was a destructive and it's bad for you physically as well, you can still work your way around that. But it's going to be much harder because they are, on an objective level, much more dangerous than traditional psychs. So don't be doing that.
Even the natural ones, and sometimes even more. Like we talk about datura and stuff like that. Like, of course, that like you just gotta be so careful with that. And the video I did yesterday, that was benzitamine. I only heard a little bit about it, but the person, I mean, it makes sense why the trip was bad. They did 2 full grams of that. So that like imagine doing 2 grams of Benadryl or 2 grams of whatever. Like just I'm not surprised. And then actually in the actual trip report, they were talking about how she saw the grudge girls, the ring girls knocking at her door and stuff like, and it was just all hallucinations. Nothing she was seeing was real, but it just felt so real. And that's the difference. What I see between deliriums and psychedelics, like most of the time, you took acid, you took shrooms, like you're on shrooms, but when you take Datura or Benadryl, like I don't remember taking that, and everything you see just seems so realistic because it just comes to you naturally. Like someone will just appear out of nowhere and be like, "Oh, hey," and then they'll just disappear, and they're like, "Well, that was kind of weird." And then someone else will come in, and then they'll be like, "Oh, hey." It's just everything happens, and then you just go with the flow, and you're terrified, but you're like you don't see it as not normal. It just goes with it. But yeah,
That's why they're
deliriums are very
fascinating.
very freaky.
That's what fascinates me about the difference between psychedelics and deliriums, in the sort of hallucinations you have, where on psychedelics maybe you will see some apparition or an entity or something, but then as you think into it and look into it, then it changes. But with the deliriums, it's almost like got a weird sort of physicality to it that obviously can change, but like when the ones that really get me, that freak me out, that are almost sort of like quite twisted more than the demons, is when like you'll be in your bedroom and then someone's on Benadryl, Datura, and then like the whole family walks in and like they start like clapping and talking to them and having actual conversations, and then the next minute they blink and they're gone, and you don't get that on psychedelics traditionally. It's like the delirium trip is just taking you on this ride that's like set in motion, whereas the psychedelic is taking you on a ride, but you can sort of, if you get a handle of it, if you have a bit of clarity, you can sort of get onto the control mechanism and manipulate the trip to make it more positive, whereas delirium is like, right, there's no going back. You've taken the Datura. You're just going to have to deal with whatever happens. And there's such a randomness to it. Like there's the insane. Like I remember reading one. Some guy looks out his window. There's like a helicopter, and all these like SWAT teams come out. They're literally about to get into the house. To the moment where you're like, I'm gonna get killed, and then it just stops, doesn't it? Then the next thing happens. Spiders, and oh mate, it's so mad. And I do get it. I get it when people. I look at so many comments saying, yeah, I've read all these Datura reports and they sound absolutely nightmarish, but I'm still quite curious to take it, and I understand it.
Right.
But there's curiosity killed the cat. Like that, it's so true. There's blind curiosity, and then there's like pure aware curiosity. Like, oh, I think I genuinely am ready in my whole life, or 100% to take salvia and experience the consciousness of like a cup or something, which is just crazy. And for some people that'll be like, wow, that was the best thing that's ever happened to me. But you've got to be 100% ready, and you'll think you're 100% ready, but you might even be 99.9% ready, and that 0.1% could throw the whole trip.
It's a weird thing. It's like I feel almost the fact that classical psychedelics are physically safe for you is like the universe is almost not to sound like too like hippie, but I feel like it's encouraging you to or not even encouraging you. It's like if you go into it with this mentality of like, I'm taking this substance that could physically harm me, like some a lot of deliriums or anything like that, the trip itself, it's going to be like a reflection of your mentality. It's going to be darker, and even though there are dark trips and classical psychedelics, they are kind of actually opportunities to grow. Whereas with deliriums, it really is just like this capture of a headspace you're in, where you're just kind of locked yourself into self-destruction for the sake of self-destruction or something like that. Because I haven't personally heard of any delirium trips that have like even given anybody a positive feeling afterwards. I don't know if you guys have. Is that
not in a traditional
They might see it that way, but
Yes.
it's not. It's
Right.
not.
Yeah, they could interpret it as positive. I think I've done one video where it was like a surprisingly positive Datura experience, and the things they were seeing weren't positive. It was all the demons. It was all the weird, messed up sort of friends sort of beckoning you to do all this weird stuff and that. And then, but by the end of it, the takeaway from it was, oh, surprisingly, I ended up quite enjoying it. So, and again, we're all wired up differently. Some people are just wired up to be a bit more sort of like sadistic in like a playful way, not sadistic like psychopathic, but like some people just are. Fear junkies, aren't they? As much as I like horror,
Yeah.
I'm as much as I like horror, and I find it fascinating. It's my probably favorite genre of anything. Love my Silent Hills and my films, Shining and that. I was like, I'm honest with myself that if I don't want to experience that, because I know I'd shit myself. Like it's enough being on psychedelics, like when stuff goes a bit awry. Even for me, little tiny things on psychedelics where, I mean, I've got ADHD, so obviously my mind's like spinning around in so many different areas at all times. And yeah, when I lose that sense of control, even after all my trips, it does still send me a bit like, oh, you really are playing with fire, aren't you? If you don't get your shit together. I've actually got these. I told you about it, didn't I, Trip Keeper? These Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds. They're literally sitting in. They're sitting in my under my desk right now. I can, in fact, yeah, they're right there. Still looking at them. And there's been so many times since I told you about that where I'm like, right, now's the time to take it. But then I have to redial and be like, why am I actually taking this? And a lot of my incentive, I have to be honest with myself, is sometimes escapism, because I've told you about like my ketamine addiction recovery, which is like obviously the biggest thing in my life right now. And there's part of me where it's like, right, why do I want to take these seeds? Am I taking it for the channel? And like, oh, I just tried a new psychedelic, and I was like, that's just not right. That's just ego, isn't it? Again, wanting to make a video, and this is just not pure. I should take them when I just get that natural instinct to be like, right, this is the time. And you know when it's the time because you get that purity of thought. Whereas I was going to take them last night, but I thought, I was like, right, why am I taking it now? All I'm going to be doing is sat here like playing games on LSA. And I was like, this is where the trips can go really badly because I'm messing about with them. And you mess about and you get karma to bite you in the ass.
So Trip Whip, that's what I actually I'm glad you brought that up, Vivek. So, my craziest trip was on Hawaiian Baby Woodrose. Have you ever done that before or no? Or like Morning Glory, maybe?
Is that LSA?
Yeah, it's LSA, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I haven't never
You
tried it
haven't?
before.
Oh, it's you got to be very careful with it. Yeah, it's changed everything about my physical, my mental world. That's a trip like how you remembered everything about your trip you're talking about. That's like that one trip that really changed me. Because I still think about it from time to time. I have a video on it. I've talked about it many times on here, and then just on the second channel. But yeah, it's crazy what that psychedelic can do to you because you don't have to take a lot. So if you were to ever take it, just don't do a lot. But it can be a good time, but that's one you got to be very careful with. I don't know if you've read reports on it before or just like I don't know if this is like new to you talking about it, but yeah, it's something. I'm surprised you can buy it like online.
You can just get seeds on eBay.
It's so weird. So, and I'm kind of glad that I kind of finished my tripping period before I found out about it because I definitely would have like for sure.
Yeah.
What's like you've talked about a lot, obviously, but if you don't mind, just kind of briefly, what is like the main difference between like LSA and like a high dose of LSD?
LSA I was getting a lot of closed eye visuals with it. I would close my eyes and I would just see like these machines and these colored things. Like it would look like almost like a video game where you try to get a ball through these circles that have little holes through them, and you got to get like all the way. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was just like all colors and just seeing. If you look on your phone, you could see the settings app on it, and like that's what I was seeing, like these gears and stuff. But the main difference was I mean I probably did a really high dose with it, so like I was physically feeling different. Like I could feel my bones touching my skin, and I would feel my teeth like being diagonal in my mouth until I looked in the mirror. That's when everything went back to normal. But as soon as I looked away, it was just I was crawling on. It felt like I was crawling on bones, and everything around me was crooked, and just the time dilation too. That was something that, like, it felt like 30 minutes went by, but it was only like 2 minutes. And yeah, it's very crazy. And then the vasoconstriction, I know that can happen with acid too, but it's like really, really bad with LSA. And but with Morning Glory, that's one I more recommend because you have to do a lot more, and it's not as strong, but it's more of like another physical thing. Like, things feel better. But yeah, the Hawaiian Baby Wood Roast is just more visual. And then, unfortunately, with me, I had that feeling that happened. It just didn't go away for a long time. And then by the when I thought the trip was going to end, that's when the schizophrenic voices started happening. I started hearing voices in my ear, and they just wouldn't be quiet. I was like covering my ear and trying to like be like, no, 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 go away. And it just kept getting louder and louder and louder. I started getting freaked out about that, and like I thought it was going to be like that forever, but finally fell asleep eventually. But yeah, it was definitely the craziest experience of my life, and definitely way different than acid.
What did the voices like um seem like? Like, was it like you were hearing entities talking to you, or was it just like voices that you didn't
It
know where they were coming from?
it literally sounded like how a schizophrenic simulation sounds like. They would just go, do it, kill him, like something like
Right.
that. It was just very horrifying. I don't think that was any entities. I probably wasn't old enough to understand what entities were because I was like 15 or 16 at the time. I'm 24 now, so yeah, it's but I don't think it was that. And yeah, it was just very horrifying, very scary.
There's a big debate,
Fair.
isn't there, about the authenticity of entities and what they are and how they relate to psychedelics. It's interesting you just said there, like, oh, I don't think it was entities, because I think it very much just shows how you interpret what's going on. Because what if you were big into entities and you're fascinated by them, and then you get this voice in your head? You could be like, right, well, it is entities doing this, but if you're not aware of entities and you don't know about them, you'll just think, right, this is just the voice in my head. So it is super relative, and I think people are getting a bit stuck on like the physicality of these entities. Like, right, we're going to this place and there's these entities here and that, but then I'm very much open to that and very much think that is a reality, because I think I'm very much like cognizant of the fact that like reality is infinite, and that there's infinite forms consciousness can take. But there's also in your own consciousness there's this relative angle going on where like you're almost creating the entity because the entity is you. And this is why I like sharing all these that's why I started getting into like alien content and UFOs and supernatural paranormal stuff, because there's a very big linkage with consciousness, with all these UFOs and the aliens and that. And obviously people say they see the greys when they take DMT, but then when people see the greys in a sober sense, they feel like they're tripping, don't they? They say it's like the trippiest moment of the whole life. So there is a massive connection there with the consciousness angle. I just read this absolutely phenomenal book called Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée. He's probably the top ufologist. It just really blew my mind open in regards to like what is going on with like entities and aliens and these spiritual beings. And I think he makes a great point where it's like in our current culture right now, we interpret these supernatural beings or beings beyond our understanding of like physicality. We interpret them as like, oh, visitors from another planet, these like little green aliens who've made a ship, because if we were them, we'd do that, because we're in like a scientific age of creating things to get somewhere. And then what's really fascinating about this book, it has an index of reports from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and the way they experienced the greys or an alien back then, it would be like someone from 200 years in the future in like some Bioshock Infinite like airship or whatever, and that's how they experience the aliens. So our experience of these entities, this force that's behind the scenes, it changes with humanity's sort of conscious level. And that is absolutely just fascinating. Definitely recommend reading that. It was a serious book.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but it's still like, That's pretty cool. What was the guy's name?
Jacques Vallée is a French ufologist. He's a super interesting man. He's actually one of the pioneers of the early internet as well. Super influential guy. And he's a scientist first and foremost. He actually obviously talks about some very woo-woo, if you want to call it. I think that term has a lot of negative connotations. But if you want to say that, it's metaphysical stuff. And he very much analyses it on an anecdotal basis. Like, right, I'm just telling you literally hundreds of accounts of what people have said they've seen. And he tries to he never says this is the case. He just posits different theories that people come up with, and the most fascinating thing about him, he's so open-minded that by the end of the book he's very humble about it, and he says, he's like, in a sense, he knows more about this than anyone in the world, and he's just as confused, if not more so, than like the layman, because this is so beyond our understanding of what's going on. And he references psychedelics in it. There's lots of pictures of these, like, say, tribes in like South America, and I mean the Aztecs were big into like entities, weren't they? And let's say the Egyptians. And what's interesting about them is, if you look into it, is they had a history of using psychedelics to access these altered states, but also beckon these entities. And I think when you start putting the pieces together, and it's not. I think as humans, we look at back on these civilizations like ancient Egypt, and they've got Ra, and they've got Anubis, and they're just like, oh well, this was just someone at the time thinking this is just an artistic endeavor. But I think it goes a lot. I think it's a lot more, a lot weirder than that. And the only reason we try and reduce it to something simple, like, they were just doing art back then, because that's what we do now. We make art. We make, like, I can draw a creature on MS Paint. It's like, no, there was something weird going back then. But the problem with humans, we look at things based upon our framework that we have now, don't we? We are very limited in our understanding of the past and even the future. Like, super crazy.
Can't even comprehend it sometimes when you think of these like deep questions about consciousness and the universe. Like, your brain almost stops you from trying to figure out what's going on. And that's why I like DMT. I want to break through. I want to get, want to get past that heavy load that I got. Like, it was nice, but I want to see what it can show me. And that's personally for me, I've talked about this. I do think the DMT entities are creators of the universe, because the DMT happening naturally in your brain, and like, it's just, I don't know. It makes so much sense to me. Is there like, what do you think, Trip Whip, about like what the DMT entities had to do with our universe? Or is it just like a hallucination from our brain?
I think it's kind of like the same thing. Kind of like, I think what you were alluding to, Vivek, with the fact that the UFOs have changed over the years. It's like there seems to be some information that we're getting in touch with. I don't know where the information is coming from. I feel like when I was back in my tripping days, I had this trip that was telling me that that all the light in the universe is connected, and where like human beings our role is to consciously process information from that's stored in this light. And so we're just on this path of processing information from the universe. I have no idea. It came from a trip. I have no idea what's really happening, but whatever's happening, we seem to be getting in touch with this information that our brain is breaking down into this narrative that our ego, our conscious self, can understand. And so I feel like that's why the experience of entities on psychedelics lines up so much with encounters with UFOs. It's like, if you're somebody who's tripping, when you start to feel like you're coming across this foreign group of information, or this information that's from somewhere else, then your ego gives you this experience of meeting an entity. But that's not to undermine the experience at all, because I feel like that's what's happening when we're sober, as well. Like, it's very easy for me to say I'm talking to two separate beings right now, but I know that if I was tripping, it would feel like I'm just talking to myself, looking through the eyes of its vessels from somewhere else in the world. So it's kind of like I think that the entities are real. I think that you get the sense that you're meeting the creators of the universe, because I mean, I'll like start by saying I have no idea, but if I had to guess, I feel like that you're seeing an aspect of yourself that is responsible for creating your reality. So for me, the machine elves, when I met them during that LSD experience, the one where I was running around naked, I got the sense that they were actors, and that they had been playing characters my whole sober life. But if I break that down, it's kind of, in a way, this trip is making me understand that I'm waking up to the fact that there's more to reality than what I was perceiving while sober. That what I was perceiving while sober is just like one lens, and one potential way to look at reality. And if you well, the way that we think about it when we're sober is that is the whole of reality. And so when you have this trip that shows you it's not the case, it feels like that sober reality is an illusion. And so as I'm waking up and getting aligned with this consciousness that is aware of the fact that my sober reality is an illusion, I'm seeing that projected, or I'm seeing that symbolized by these entities around me who are aware of the fact that my sober reality was an illusion, or in other words, they are actors because they have been pretending to be the sober people, or the people that I knew while sober. And now I'm getting in touch with this level of information that is aware that there is many ways to look at reality. So long way of saying, basically, I think that these entities are a hallucination, in that they are not exactly, or like they are as we see them, because if you don't look at it like I don't know how to explain it, but
they're not physical, though, are they? They're metaphysical. They're not constrained by biology, are they? They obviously,
exactly.
For me, the objectivity of it, and again, the addendum is I don't really know, but for me personally, on a level, this is what I feel. So there is an objective reality to these entities, but they don't operate like this force doesn't operate like a biological three-dimensional being. Even if we're talking about like dimensions on a scientific level, we're very much aware now that there's higher dimensions, and if we want to tie in this scientific aspect to the existence of entities, they could be operating on the 12th dimension, and they can manipulate reality just via thought. And that's why I think about the UFOs when they say, it's very now clear to me, getting super into it, that it's not I mean, there's probably are aliens that have created some speed of light machine that can get across the universe, but I think the majority of these UFOs and is the supernatural, ethereal force that's sort of like behind the scenes, and it's like a different form of consciousness that can like, right, say this consciousness, it's completely unlimited. It's not quite God, but it's like an interdimensional being that can interact with like God / the universe. So it can just like, oh, I'm going to think myself into the Earth dimension. I'm going to go. These are my favorite ones. The UFO ones, where like there'd be these battles in like ancient Roman times and battles throughout history, and they talk about the flying chariots above watching them, and they talk about they write about it in a very poetic manner, where you may be reading back, if you didn't have any sort of frame of reference, what they're on about. You're like, oh, this is just how the Romans described the battles, and they just saw these things to make it more poetic. But there's so many of them that say literally the chariots, the angels were flying over us, watching us. And for me, when I look at that and I'm trying to explain it to myself, I'm like, well, this is this force, this unlimited consciousness that can just go to a point in reality and be like, I can just go there like that, like as a blip. You're not constrained by physicality or physics. That's why the UFOs can literally just like bend time and space, because in a sense they're not traveling through just space, they're traveling through time and space. They're interlinked. So point in space-time where the Romans are fighting, it's the same thing. It's space and time, isn't it? You can go, if you were unlimited, you could go there. And I think that's why when you take psychedelics, sometimes people end up in the past, don't they? People end up in like in London, like Victorian London, and it's very, very real. And I think when you're taking a psychedelic like that, it's heightening your consciousness, and you're sort of shedding like your limited consciousness that's constrained by biology, physicality. You can experience that glimpse of maybe what this heightened conscious entity can experience. And obviously it's a lot of rambling, but that's how it makes the most sense to me.
Yes.
Yeah,
What about yourself, Tails?
Uh, I like what I said before. There's asking the question. When I was listening to Terrence McKenna talk about his DMT trips, because he's the best at describing it, in my opinion, at least from what I've heard. Like he can actually like physically or talk about
Yeah,
like what he
yeah,
saw. Like I always
yeah,
remember his dribbling basketballs. That's how he saw it. Like it just stuck with my mind. I can actually visualize that. But yeah, just seeing them and just hearing like people say how like they did DMT or some psychedelic, and like their cat interacted with it, like they saw
yes,
it or something. That's the
yeah,
part that makes me think that they did construct this universe, and like they had something to do with it, and with the DMT just being found naturally in our brains, and just when you smoke it, you just get that all up front with you. And that's why I believe that. I mean, I'm not like a psychedelic man, it's a psychonaut, whatever they call it. But that's just from my perspective. That's just how I see it. I think they did have something, because it's so weird. They seem. I wish I can have experienced one, because I really want to know what it's like. But like just from what I've heard, from what you said, they just seem so like, I don't know. They seem so interesting, and I think they did do something. Maybe not everything, but they had a part in what, because we can't even, if we can't comprehend them, we can't comprehend the Big Bang, if that's true. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, most logical way, but like we don't know. And when we're
right,
unlocking this DMT realm, or like unlocking a part of the brain that we can't see, and your brain blocks it out all the time. But when you smoke DMT, like you see what you're actually like, what the actual universe is, and you see these machine elves and stuff coming to you, telling you stuff and whatever they're doing. But yeah, it's just it's very interesting to me to think about that. And it just, when hearing people talk about it, just makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've never
It's funny.
actually met an entity, which is quite interesting. I'm so fascinated
Oh, wow.
about them. Yeah, I've never actually genuinely experienced an entity of the only sort of entity of or like thing beyond myself. Well, not even, this is interesting because I saw it as myself, but not physical. It wasn't like a traditional entity that looked like what people describe it as. When I took 4-ACO DMT, I had my overdose on it. 90 milligrams, and it was the deepest psychedelic experience I've ever had. There was this, it was like the feminine aspect of myself. I experienced that. A lot of people talk about it. So like this purple aura that had a feminine figure, motherly, but also romantic as well. And I saw it as like the opposite of myself, but also the same thing. It was like I was representing the male energy, and that was the female energy. So I saw her as separate, but I was cognizant of the fact that it was just me. So that was the closest I've come to experiencing an entity. And also, this is quite funny. A few weeks ago, I was at this just sort of little festival, mini festival, and I wasn't actually taking anything, but I like to follow the universe when I'm at these places, because I'm like, right, I plan to take on psychedelics going into it, because I know sometimes I want to do it just purely for escapism. But little things led up throughout the day, and then this girl offers me a mushroom chocolate bar, and I was like, in that moment, I didn't even need to think about it. I was like, this is the universe saying this is a great time to take psychedelics. And I got really trippy. It was a beautiful trip. It was just so positive. It was fun. And then it got to a point later on where we started talking about aliens and entities, all of us, and obviously a lot of people didn't really know about them. So I was telling them about like Passport to Magonia and the stuff we do, and the stuff you talk about, Trip Whip. And then there was this point, just as I was going back to my tent, and I just had this thought. I was like, is this it? Is this the moment they appear? And then there was a bit of fear came. I was like, oh my, because then the ego came back like, wait, what if the entities have got nefarious plans for me? They're going to take me off to the spaceship and abduct me. And I think in that moment, maybe I could have had like an entity encounter, but the ego re-solidified, and it prevented me. I was in my tent, and I was just like sat there, and I was like, they're going to open it up, aren't they? There's going to be a grey that opens up the tent, and I'm going to shit myself. And I was like, well, of course the entities aren't going to come and see me right now, because I'm not in the right state
Right.
for it. So yeah, that was quite weird.
You guys are both very open-minded and very like aware. Like the way both of you were talking about entities, I figured for sure you'd met them, because like not many people have that belief, and also can describe them in that way without meeting them. Especially me, like before I'd ever even if I'd heard stories about entities, which I don't think I had, but if I were to, I just would have disregarded them, like just dismiss them as just pure hallucinations, because they are way like far more convincing than you realize. Well, I guess than I realized when I was sober. But that's really cool. So I am surprised though. Do you guys ever try meditate or have like do meditation while you trip?
I have never done it sober. I've never done it in a trip, but I am very interested in trying that because I could feel like that would be the setting where I can actually visit one. Yeah, I don't know about Vivek, but
That's what did it for me. That's what did it for me.
Yeah, I've
okay.
meditated. I used to have I need to get back into it because it was. I think meditation is probably for me the ultimate remedy for my ADHD erratic mind. I've been reflecting a lot on, say, when I was deep into just using psychedelics in the most perfect way back in 2018 to 2020. After my naked escapade, that's when I got my head in gear and I got into meditation, spirituality, and I meditated every single day, and I was just literally in peak consciousness mode. I was so pure of mind, it was great. And then obviously I just fell off the path, and now I'm having to sort of deal with the repercussions of it. And now that I've started getting back into meditation, there's a Buddhist temple about an hour away from me up in Ulverston, and I went and meditated there for the first time in a very long time. And it was like not driving a car for 5 years, but you still know it's like second nature. You knew how to do it, so I was like, of course, it's always there. It's always there inside of me. But again, what has happened on a level for me since I've fallen off like the disciplined path is my ego has retaliated and it's solidified, and there is a bit of fear in me now of psychedelics, and I have to be like very honest with myself. There is a bit of there's fear has crept back up into my life. The ketamine addiction has completely fried my brain. It's turned me into it turned me into even more of an ADHD person. I was watching some of my older videos and I was like, even just analyzing my energy, and I was like, oh, there was a lot more of a pure state of mind. And on a scientific level, doing ketamine every day, doing any drug every day, like, well, even with psychedelics, super safe stuff, like on a chemical level, like what you're overloading these receptors in your brain, aren't they? Like we don't know really what they're doing in the long run at all. Even with cannabis, I think this is a good thing to talk about. Cannabis, like you're smoking it like every single day. Like think of like your brain, how much stress it's putting on your nervous system. And like you say, meditation. Obviously, I know you're into like sensory deprivation tanks as well, aren't you, Trip? Where they're awesome. I love them. I still use them, but I need to just do it I need to just do a meditation type thing or mindfulness type thing every day, because you just got to put the work in, haven't you? And I'm very cognizant of the fact that at the moment I am in a bit of a slump. But the thing is, in life, you've got a choice, haven't you? So you just got to do it, haven't you? You've got to do it. So I'd love to get back into meditating. And I have meditated on psychedelics. I've meditated on all of them back in the day. But sometimes, because obviously I'm very ADHD, it can get you think you're meditating, but you're not. You're just sort of literally sat there with your eyes closed, aren't you? Yeah. And I remember meditating on 2CB thinking like, right, this is it. I'm going to experience God consciousness again. I was going into it thinking, right, I want to replicate my ego deaths. I want to have like the perfect ego death, and I was like, but this is me wanting it. This is the ego wanting it. So when I was meditating 2CB, I literally was just sat there with my mind just going off, and it was like the inverse of meditation. It was like I was making myself worse. Then when I let go and sort of just like laid there and didn't try to meditate, I started meditating. So that was really cool.
Right. It's funny. I think like while you're just talking just then, I felt like it was my inner voice talking to me, because like I had one meditation session the other day, which was the first one in a long time, and it was so good. Like it was just 45 minutes, and it went by like 5 minutes because I'm listening to music at the same time. It's not like proper meditation. It's just what I used to how I used to meditate when I'd trip. I'd like just not think, just not allow myself to think. Normal traditional meditation, I think they say, you detach from your thoughts, you watch them drift by like clouds. But I just wanted to make myself trip harder. And the way I would do that was I wouldn't move a muscle it wasn't allowed. And whenever I'd get like an itch or like I'd feel the desire to like swallow something, I get excited because I'd be like, okay, that's an opportunity to trick my brain into thinking that I'm asleep. I'm not going to itch it. I'm not going to swallow. I'm just going to not move so that my brain goes like deeper and starts generating, more like visuals for me. And it was amazing. Like just doing that the other day, the first one that I'd done in probably a couple of years, to be honest, which is crazy. I felt like high after. It was the best feeling I've felt in a long time. So I definitely need to get back into it. But for you, Tails, and maybe Vivek, I don't know, but if you are like wanting to meet entities in a trip, the way it happened for me was I started doing astral projection techniques during the trip. So I lie down, and a big part of that is not allowing yourself to itch, not allowing yourself to move. And then you kind of concentrate on like a single like point and you just like look there. And then I kind of customized it a little bit for like in astral projection, you're meant to pretend you're like pulling yourself out with a rope. Instead, for myself, I would look into the static vision that I could see with my eyes closed.
Mm-hmm.
And then while I just wouldn't allow myself to think, react, because as you're staring at the static vision, the vision starts to form into images and things. And I felt that at some point, like my intuition was just kind of saying, it's trying to trick you. It's trying to capture your attention. And so don't give it, any thought. Don't allow yourself to be distracted by it. And I found it was getting deeper and the visuals were getting more and more intense. And eventually it just felt like a series of tests until I was allowed access to these entities. And for me, in the early days, that was like the alien abduction episodes. I thought I was blacking out. I would just see these visuals getting crazier and crazier. I wouldn't allow myself to think or move. And then at some point, my memory was just wiped. And I would kind of like, I'd be sitting up and I'd be like, I can't remember how I started sitting up. And then, a couple of months later of doing this like once every 2 weeks or however often I was doing it, I just like got all these memories of being in this, like on this operating table with these white light beings working on me. And it felt so real and so vivid. Like I was working at Domino's at the time, just delivering a pizza, and I got this flash of memories of being abducted by aliens. I just started freaking out. I was like, what the hell? And I didn't realize that they were from while I was tripping. I just thought like my imagination had found a way to like create, what felt like genuine memories. But the next time I had a trip, I did, like instead of blacking out, I stayed conscious, and all of a sudden there were these entities just standing over me, and I could no longer open my eyes at that point. It was like, it's gone to a place now where, I'm locked in here. And I felt like they were sifting around my consciousness. It had that really felt like I was the androids from Westworld, and they would, I felt like I was just taking out the false reality and getting worked on. And they told me they were conscious of the fact that I was, conscious, and they were like, "Don't think, like just to make the operation easier, just continue not to think, just be relaxed and chill. Let us do our thing, and we'll take you back shortly." And then, they'd do their thing and I'd slip back and open my eyes. And that was how it all started for me. And after that, even when I wasn't meditating during trips, the entities started to appear. The people around me started becoming the entities. And then, of course, in DMT, you would just see the entities firsthand.
My friend told me to watch Westworld the other day, so it's funny that you mentioned that. He started watching. He's like, "Mate, I'm watching this thing right now. It's right up your alley." So the fact that you've just described it like that sounds awesome. Yes. There's I'm definitely drawn to that sort of type of media. I watched the other day AI, Artificial Intelligence, the Spielberg film.
Right.
Yeah, and I've not seen it. This is quite interesting because I remember they used to show us it in religious education and studies in school, in high school. And if you ever watch that film, there's a point where the film literally just changes into something completely like batshit. It's like Blade Runner on crack. And then, but the first like 40 minutes is the ramifications of having an artificial child, and he'd always show us it up to that minute, Mr. Edmondson, of that arc of the film, and he'd turn it off. So then I watched it the other day, and then that film gets super profound towards the end, and it's I'd highly recommend watching it. The depiction of the entities in that, because I think everyone misinterprets them as like they look like aliens, like with the big heads, and they've got like ethereal bodies. They're more like the spiritual aliens or DMT entities. But actually, in the context of the film, I don't want to spoil it, but it implies maybe that they're like the end point of a biological humanity, and that we're sort of going through it with the AI here, because like everyone's talking about AI artificial intelligence, but what fascinates me is like artificial consciousness. Like, is that possible? And I'm very much now at the point where I'm like, okay, if we take consciousness on a very scientific level of like, or with what talk about how it emerges scientifically, it's like all of these data collection points in this super advanced system, a brain, come together to allow you to perceive reality in a sentient manner. I don't understand why a mechanical being couldn't do that. And what's really interesting about, you hear about the Greys, about all these people who've like been in the ships and they've been operated on. The Greys aren't actually like biological, they appear to be, but they're actually they're created, they're like drones, and that makes me think that maybe like the force, the higher consciousness force that's behind the scenes, the machine elves, whatever you want to call it, it's all just different names for the same thing. That maybe they project themselves into 3D reality through these like these drones that are the Greys. But then there's a brilliant, or absolutely excellent YouTuber, Jesse Michaels. He does incredible stuff on aliens, and just hypothetically speaking about it, but he gets like the top heads. He's spoken to Jacques Vallée, and he did this one about what if aliens or the Greys are like time traveling humans from the future, where it's like the end point of where humanity's supposed to go. But the irony is that behind the scenes it was us the whole time. Like, we are the force, it's just consciousness, isn't it? And that's when I think you're starting to put all the pieces together, where like when I saw that purple woman and the for ASU DMT trip, part of my like limited self was like, oh, this is one of them entities, this is like something separate from me that exists in another plane. I was like, but it got to that point where I was so conscious, I was like, no, this is just me, isn't it? Like on a level. And like I even look at just like, you just look at animals. I look at my dog and I'm like, that's just like consciousness experiencing dog consciousness, isn't it? Like, so right. I'm super protective of like you know, like beforehand when you're younger, like if there's a fly in your room or something and you might kill it because it's the easier thing to do, or there's a spider and you're too scared to grab the spider, and then later I've just been like, why would you want to like stop that? Like, just let it.
They got all their jobs to do, man. That's why with animals, like, I mean, I'm still eating meat, but like with spiders and stuff, like I respect that they're in my home and they eat the smaller, more annoying bugs. So if I do not want them in my house, I will literally pick them up with a napkin, like gently, and I'll let them outside. Yes, same with stink bugs and stuff. Like, I cannot, like, I've always liked spiders, never been afraid of them. Like maybe like a black widow or something, of course I'd be afraid of, but you know, ones that aren't gonna harm me, it's just I feel, you know, empathy towards them and just every other being basically, except ants. Fuck ants.
Yeah, we hate ants. Yeah, if there's any ants watching, we don't like you.
Yeah, I had a problem with them in my house, and it was, oh my god, they were just all over the place. They were annoying. Oh, and midges in Ohio, it gets really, really bad off the lake. They're just like every house is just, they fly off. They don't bite or anything, but there's like millions of them, and it's like, it gets really annoying. They just fly all over you. But yeah, mostly, you know, with other beings, I like to, you know, just leave them alone. You know, do what they got to do.
I was just gonna say, obviously, you live in Australia, don't you? And you've got a lot of funky creatures out there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we don't really see them, but like, we do apparently. Yeah, like in the city here, you won't really see any like dangerous spiders and stuff. We got like pretty, you know, harmless spiders inside the house every now and then, but I guess, yeah, like I feel like if I was to go into the woods, what would be normal for me might not be normal for you guys.
Oh yeah, it's much more
Apparently,
dangerous, isn't it? Like I live out in the sticks, where in England, in the northwest, up near the lakes. So literally
yeah,
just down the road from me, there's loads of forest, there's loads of greenery and woodland, and yeah, the most dangerous thing you're gonna find there is a tick, a literal tick that could get
right.
on your leg. It's not like I'm gonna find a bear or a crocodile or even like a venomous snake. But I went over to Australia in 2012. My family actually lives over there, around Mandurah, Perth area,
Yeah, yeah,
the western side, and we went seriously exploring the outskirts and going into the lush, like, forested areas. And I saw an alligator for the first time in my life, or a crocodile, one of them crocodilian fellas, and I was like, whoa, that
yeah,
is just crazy for me to come from England, where like you just see a cow or a sheep, which isn't,
yeah,
I guess it's obviously it's an animal, it's a natural animal, but it's been farmed, isn't it? It's been placed
yeah.
there, and I was like, just to see something that exquisite out in the wild. And there was kangaroos running around streets and everything, jumping about there. I saw loads of wildlife when I was in Perth, and like dolphins and that by the bay. And I was like, whoa, this is a whole other world. And I was just thinking this because I was saying to Tails, I'm going to Japan later on in the year, and we were talking about this in the last one, where I was like, I've got to be very aware of the fact, like, if I want to go on a walk into like nature, it's not like me going down the road now where I don't have to worry about anything. Like, there's bears, and there's crazy stuff. There's like mad venomous insects and reptiles and everything. And sometimes you forget, don't you? There's very extreme parts of the world, even though they're very beautiful. Like Amazon rainforest, it's beautiful, isn't it? But like, if I step foot in there, I'd just die.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny. We don't think about it, but it's like there's really no bush area that I would ever walk in without first like hitting a stick, because like there could just be a snake that will kill you if it bites you once.
Yeah.
And though we don't really get a lot of crocodiles here, but you said you saw crocodiles, what, in Mandurah?
Yeah, we went canoeing, somewhere around there. We explored quite a lot of like the western part, where, or like, obviously a big country, isn't it? So we explored a big chunk of where we were, within driving range. And yeah, we went canoeing, and obviously the guy was like, the fucking crocodiles in the Nile or something. I was like, nah, surely not. And then we got on there, and then they told us to get off the canoe and come back because there was crocodiles there. And then we got back to where this bar was, and you could literally see like just the top of them floating on the river. And I was like, whoa, that is just super mad that I was just near this beast that has no qualms about literally crunching my skull and that. And it makes you very humble, especially coming in for honestly, in the UK we do really have it easy in terms of like animals wanting to do you in. It's the people you want to worry about here in the UK. That's but that's anywhere, isn't it? Oh yeah, we're having a crazy time here in the UK. I'm even in America. I don't know what is it like in Australia in terms of like crime and stuff, and like underdeveloped places and poverty-stricken areas, because I don't really hear of like lots of like super extreme stuff. There's lots of shootings in America. Like, what's it like over there in terms of like crime and that?
Well, okay, well, give me 1 sec. I gotta put my phone on charge because I'm hotspotting at the moment. It's got 2%. So 1 sec, but I answer that in a moment.
Nice one. Well, we could talk about this for now, yeah, because obviously, the shooting stuff in America is crazy, isn't it? But over here, we've got our equivalent is knife crime and gangs and.
Right. I don't know what's more scarier, I would think the fact that shootings you can die instantly, and the fact that it happens at little schools like the one that happened in Texas in Uvalde, that one was just completely tragic. But I haven't really heard one in a while that happened. There's still shootings, but like I'm glad the school shootings. Hopefully they slow down and stop happening. Like I haven't seen one in
Yeah,
the news in a while, so we're praying for the best. But man, it's just
yeah,
like regular shootings. Yeah, it does happen. But usually,
it's
if you're in like
tragic.
a bad neighborhood, if you're gonna get shot up, you're only gonna it's gonna be like a crossfire. But yeah, usually random places that happens at. You gotta just always be on the lookout in America. But yeah, Australia, I don't know. I feel like you guys probably have it the best. Just people are chill, like in New Zealand too. But it probably
Yeah.
still happens, of course. But yeah, go
Well,
explain it.
do you guys get like because I want to go to America because like there's a lot of creators over there, obviously. And Vivek, next time you're in Perth, definitely let me know, bro. You have to let me know.
100%. Like I say, I've got family over there. I'll definitely be going. And obviously, I think I might be staying in Japan for quite a long time. And the best thing about that is Australia's sort of round the corner, especially coming from the UK. Going to Australia was a long ass flight, even longer for me going to Japan. But yeah, that'd be ideal. I'd love to meet up with all you lot. It'd be awesome. And like you just said, I think what would be great for all of us in the scene, anyone who's watching now, I know all the boys like Jake Knows Nothing, Gabe, and everybody. Actually, going to America would be in our best interest to all. Collect there. Not only is that most of our audience from there, there's so many more like conventions, isn't there? Like psychedelic conventions. That would be amazing for us to do like a panel one day together. It's definitely possible. And I've always wanted to go to the US, but yeah, there is always that thing in the back of my head, like, oh, am I gonna go to a place and there's gonna be like some super shooting, or there's gonna be I'm gonna drop a bomb. But then again, I go around
like
the UK.
Stereotype a little bit now, like it's over. It's most of the time it's overblown. Usually you're safe, but there's time like you just can't. You don't know like it could like for the in football there's the Kansas City Chiefs when they won the Super Bowl, there was a shooting at their parade, like no one was going to expect that to happen, but like that happened unfortunately. But usually in suburban areas like where I live, nothing happens ever, but like you got to be careful in like ghettos and stuff in dangerous cities. But
I was thinking about this last night, right? I was just sat in my house. I was like, right, I'm so safe right now. I'm in such a comfortable position. I was becoming really appreciative of like my experience of life. But I also thought it was like the madness of life is that down the road in this little village I live in, there's a little part of the village, say like maybe like the council estate, the rougher part, where there's literally unimaginable sort of like hells occurring to people, and that fascinates me about life. There's you can be in this little comfortable bubble that I'm in now. Down the road, there's someone like poverty stricken in some house, literally down the road from me. There's loads of drug dealings going on. There's gang related stuff. Even in this small quaint little place where I think everyone. Where I live, there's a lot of older people who retire here. They're not aware, and they don't want to be aware of that dark thing that's happening around the corner. That's why I love David Lynch. If you've ever watched David Lynch films,
David Lynch, bro.
You know Blue Velvet. The big theme of that was him finding the ear in the suburban beautiful area that he didn't think anything could happen. It leads him down this. That path to discover the darkness underlying, and that's why he's my favourite filmmaker, because he said he grew up in Philadelphia where it was a very sort of super dark place, but there was like bursts of light there, and it just shows you there's the reality is just boundless, isn't it? And mad stuff happening down the road.
I mean, it is wild. Like where I live in Perth, there's not many places that I'm aware of, at least around me, that are particularly dangerous. Like, I'm pretty comfortable waking up each day, and knock on wood, there's nothing that's going to happen that's going to take me out. That's really unexpected. But when I was living in Queensland, I wasn't that far from a place called Alice Springs, and it really was the case that like if I went to Alice Springs, which sometimes I had to go pretty close to it when I was visiting some family. Like if I wanted to go inside Alice Springs, which is a large area, I had to go with a guide. And if I didn't go with a guide, the likelihood of me being killed was like extremely high. And it's wild. It's like, it's just this one town surrounded by places that are completely safe, where everyone is just for some reason just agreed, or well, not agreed, but just for whatever reason, it's on site. And whoever's like a foreigner, whoever looks like they're at a place, they are fresh meat to just be, targeted and stolen from or just killed.
This sort of ties into what we were talking about earlier about when you take psychedelics and you get like that spiritual ego thinking you're the chosen one and you're invincible and you're unlimited always at all times, and then reality re-solidifies and it sort of teaches like, yep, you might have been in that moment when you realized God and there was no limits and you're all powerful, but you got to remember what you are, what you're going to be for most of your life as a human. And this is something I think is almost like the tragedy of a lot of psychonauts, is that they are lost chasing these mystical states when you let's say, this is how I try to think of it, what am I? I'm consciousness choosing to be a human, and you've got to be at peace with the fact that for most of life, you're going to be in the sober and sort of normal consciousness, and try and see the beauty in that, because I mean, it's the most beautiful thing ever. Like I said, natural highs from meditating. I think a lot of psychonauts could do with. A lot of them I do, and I respect them for going into these profound mystical states and experiencing all the stuff that like most people are afraid of, but a lot of them don't have the practice in the normal life and the chasing, and that's what got me into stuck on ketamine, was because it gave me that it was the only thing I ever found, because I've always had a bit of a drug problem. I've always been a bit of like a party person, thrill seeker, and I'm now coming out of it and wanting to rebalance, but there's like elements of my shadow that I've not integrated, and the ket was like, it was masking this contempt I sort of have for just like my normal mind when I should be at peace with it. Because ket literally was the only substance I took where I was like, no thoughts. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. I've been thinking from literally the minute I got out the womb, I've been analysing like constantly, and it's so draining. And the ket, when I found that, I was like, oh my god, this is sort of what I've been searching for. But then you abuse it and it makes your life worse. And now my thoughts are more erratic than ever, and it's trying to tell me that I need to just dial in and chill out just normally. It's literally just be a normal human, innit? Like, some psychonauts are just, they forget what they really are. Well, not what they really are, but what they are right now and what they're going to be for most of their life, which is just a flesh being, innit?
Yeah. It's too, like, it's an extreme state, and I feel it's like, I've heard, this comparison made all the time, where it gives you the answers. It gives you the answers, but not the method of getting to that answer. Or like, it's like going through if you got if you're doing a test, I wish I remember the actual quote, but it's like, if you're doing a test and you look at the answer book, you see what the answer is, but you don't actually know how to make your way there. You don't know the method involved to get that answer. That's kind of what it is like taking psychedelics. It's like you are just thrown into this headspace, which is completely, at the best of times, it's when you're completely accepting yourself, completely in touch with that state of loving and of just being love, and appreciating everything in your life. But then you're thrown back into being sober, and it can actually make sober consciousness seem worse sometimes, because you're like, well, I've just had this extreme high and it felt so real. Why can't I feel that? And it almost feels like it's mocking you. It's like, it seemed like I was going to be there forever. And now I'm back to just who I was before. But I think it's definitely, something that you can integrate, that you have to, look at. Maybe you won't ever get back into that state sober, but you've at least seen the direction you should be working towards. And if you do keep working towards that sort of consciousness of loving yourself, loving others, accepting who you are, most likely you're going to stop, like, trying to just make the most money possible to show off to people, and you're going to start doing what you're passionate about, start treating others with respect. And at least in that way, that will slowly improve your life. And if you're meditating each day as well, I'm sure it'll help you also just become a little bit more present, which is a big thing about trips. But yeah, it is definitely something that is like a double-edged sword. It can show you the path, and I'm sure you are walking that path, Vivek, but it can make your sober experience seem even more stark immediately after.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I was going to ask you something, both of you, I thought it was quite interesting. It's also interesting for the audience about what it's like to be a content creator, and sort of, I've noticed it in myself. I think we all do, as someone who's out there and sort of has that notoriety. There's always that, in me, there's that element of that the ego that I'm aware of and that I don't channel and try to be as pure as possible. And I have to understand it when celebrities go off the rails and they think they're like the greatest person ever and they become narcissistic, because I was going to say that, how have you dealt with that, both of you? Because sometimes there is that element of me like, oh, I'm this YouTuber and blah blah, I can do whatever, I've made it and all that, and I know it's not me, I know it's just the ego thoughts, isn't it? And it's good to be aware of that, and that's why I don't channel into it. But you look at all these content creators and you can see who's narcissistic and who's the pure mind. So how have you two dealt with that, with just sort of having a bit of like notoriety and etc.?
You go first, Trip.
You wanna go first?
You're good.
Okay. I got a kind of boring answer, I guess. For me, I think I actually had more of that with YouTube. Even though the YouTube following is like, nothing compared to the TikTok following. When I had my YouTube following, it was the first time I'd ever had that. It was the first time I was making videos about things that I was really passionate about, and other people cared, and it really surprised me. And I think, I wasn't. I didn't have enough of a following to kind of attach to it to the extent and be like, I'm this guy and I've made it, because I wasn't making like any money from it really. But I think I I got to a point where I started overthinking the videos too much, and life got in the way, and I stopped uploading videos. My passion for it kind of went away, and I saw how it just quickly died, and my YouTube channel, just didn't have the following it once had. And so when I created my TikTok, and still to this day, I've not been attached to it. Every morning I wake up, I check my TikTok to see if it's been banned or not. I'm very like, I'm kind of aware of the fact that it can go at any moment. And I think I have to, in order to continue making content and not let the stress get to my head, I've kind of had to detach from it. And I'm also terrible at like reading comments and messages and crap. So I very much just kind of treat it like a job, like any other job. I wake up, I get to work, I upload the video, and if it does well, if it gets, a good amount of views, awesome. That just helps me set me up for my future goals, and hopefully people enjoyed it. Beyond that, I don't really look at it much. It also helps that I'm in Australia, where like none of my followers are, so I've been recognized like less than 5 times, and I feel nothing like a celebrity, because I'm nothing like a celebrity. It's so yeah, it hasn't really affected me too much, I guess.
That's good.
Yeah, with for me, like definitely after when my channel did get terminated, like how you said, you wake up, oh, is my TikTok gonna be banned? Like I did not expect I don't know if you saw, but when in February, I woke up and it got terminated, and that was like a really eye-opening experience for me, because you just realize that you're doing all this work and stuff, and then one day it could just be like, gone in an instant like that. And just seeing the loads of support I got through messages and people signing the petition, making videos in the petition explaining why my channel is not like, harmful to people, that really made me like realize what kind of following I have and how big it is, and you don't really notice that, because for me, I'm a mail carrier in America, so I'm just like a normal average Joe, it's to have that YouTube channel while also having my job. It's like you got to stay humble and not take anything for granted. And yeah, it's just it's crazy to know how much your videos affect people. Like they say, how they fall asleep to it, how much, like especially when people say like they're getting through addiction, they say my videos got them through it, helped them. Like that just makes me feel amazing. That's why I do it. Like there's so much that you can get from doing YouTube, and it could be very beneficial. But yeah, it's definitely a weird feeling. Like it's hard to say if you have an ego for it, or you're just like living in the moment. I don't.
Yeah, there's a fine line, isn't there? Because I think sometimes I've said this in my videos, and I was like, I completely understand if people like say, oh, Vivek's quite egotistical or egocentric or whatever, and I was like, well, I'm fully understand that, because in a sense you've got to be, haven't you? You online on platforms. I don't know, like who you guys watch. Like when I watch someone, I like to see someone a bit like charismatic and almost like self-confident, but in a healthy sense. And then I don't like to watch people who have got clearly they've lost themselves in it, haven't they've got lost in, oh, I'm this big YouTuber, I'm detached from everyone, and blah 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 blah. It's like, that's when it gets destructive. But what's interesting for me now, where I'm having a bit of like a recursive relationship with it, is because obviously I was saying before how I've been getting recognised a lot in real life, because the UK it's tiny, and Lancaster, the big city near where I live, which basically where I spend most of my time, it's now got to a point where I'm like, every single time I now go out into town, now that I've very much revealed myself as a person, what I look like, what I sound like, and they're now my most popular videos this year. there is now, I now have to very much accept that I've opened Pandora's box, and that there will be people coming up to me, and it is surreal, and I do love it, but it's also quite scary. It's also quite scary to go, like you said. I'm an average Joe as well, trip keeper. Like when I'm not doing my YouTube, I literally just go do like odd labouring jobs. I just literally live like the normal. Obviously, I'm not a normal person. I'm very weird, but just the way I live life is not like, I'm not a celebrity at all. So when like I'm going into town or something, and people do come up to me and like talk to me about the YouTube, sometimes people talk to me and it's like, they're trying, I don't know, like they're trying to like almost get something out of you, like, oh, is that big YouTuber, he must have a big ego or whatever, and I have a big ego, let's work together, and let people come and say, oh, you should get on my podcast and stuff, and then I have to just sort of politely say, oh, I'm not really very interested, and then they take that as an offence. So I've been having sort of those type of experiences lately that have made me sort of now detach from these parasocial relationships that I've very much engaged with. I know you talk to your fans and followers, and it's awesome, isn't it, to talk to them? But then I've been having a lot of sort of quite bizarre parasocial interactions where it feels like it's telling me to now, right, just take a step back, because it's getting bigger and it's not stopping. And do I want to be like some super celebrity? Like some guy was saying like Vivek could be like the new Terence McKenna, and I was like, well, I don't actually want to be that. Like you might want me to be that, and you might see the potential in that, but I on a level am not ready. It's in its infancy, isn't it? Really, what us three are doing, even though we've been working on it for years, it's still a child, isn't it?
Yes.
Watching I watch YouTubers that have been there since the very beginning, and a lot of them say that they're only just comfortable with it now, because it's so chaotic, isn't it, dealing with just social media and being out there, and just so many variables, and you get a lot of extreme people, especially psychedelics, what we cover. A lot of extreme people are into that all across the spectrum.
I think also it's one of the like most annoying parts about it is the messages. Like for me, I felt one thing I've been trying to remind myself is to enjoy this, because it could be banned any day, and I know if it was banned I would feel horrible, but it's like I'm not really enjoying it to the extent that it should feel as horrible as I know it would feel if I lost it, because it's like I wish I could relish a little bit more the nice comments and the nice messages, but they don't, for whatever reason. If I get like somebody saying like I really enjoy your videos, or like you help me in XYZY, or XY, you know what I mean, if they like they got something
Alphabets.
I don't really take it doesn't feel real. Do you guys get that at all?
No, it doesn't at all. Yeah, it does not feel real whatsoever.
Yeah, it's so surreal, and almost in a sense it can have a bit of a negative aspect on me. Where I do feel obligated to reach out to everybody, and I did it for years. Now. I've done it for years now, and it's now got to a point where I just need to slow down and sort of be a bit robotic and be like, oh, thanks for watching, really appreciate it, hope you're well. Yes. And then, but I, for a long time now, I've been carried away, and everyone listening now that messages me, and I absolutely love you lot. But if I ever stop messaging you or just react to it like a love heart react, it's not me losing interest in you, it's me literally having to dial back for myself. I'm sort of I've noticed now I had like a bit of like not like a breakdown of a day, but it was quite an emotional moment. I was like, I'm putting way too much of my energy into other people and feeling like I'm obligated to do it, and I'm like losing myself through other people, and I need to dial it back. But thankfully, everybody who interacts with me is super understanding of that, because they're all super conscious people, and we've got a great audience. But then there's always that one person. Sometimes I get like someone will ring me like on Instagram or something like, "Yo, Vivek, I'm tweaking off the shrooms right now," and I'll be like, "I'm not. I'm in bed, mate. I really can't be doing
when
that."
They try to call me, when I get people trying to call me, like, "Dude, what are you doing? This is like you gotta respect my boundaries." Like I don't mind people messaging me. I love it. But like when you start like, spamming me, telling me like, dude, I'm dying here. I'm like, well, not dying, but like, they're tweaking out like you said, and they start to call, and it's like, I can't, like, I'm not a therapist for you.
No.
You got to figure that out on your own.
There's a problem with idol worship, isn't there, of figures, and this just happens. I mean, I do it myself. I not even idol worship, but I do. I look up to like big celebrities and content creators, artists, famous people that are really sick, and I understand when people they put them on a pedestal, not even in a pedestal, but they place like importance on them in all areas, like, oh, he's got this figured out, so he must be able to help me out in this way, or he's got that figured out. And I have to be honest with people, like sometimes they ask me about stuff, and I just have to be, sometimes I would almost like bullshit my way around it and be like, yeah, I can help you out with this thing. And then now I've just realised the best thing to say to someone is like, I don't know about that. You're best doing, you go on Google and research it yourself. Like this is
or watch my videos that I've done many videos on that I don't have experience with, but I've talked about.
Yeah, you've got to do a lot of this stuff yourself, haven't you? Like, I think it's great that people consume the trip reports and our content, and they get a lot of their information from that. But we are just one resource out of so many. Get stuck into like other people, get stuck into other perspectives. Like if you're really obsessed, or not obsessed, but like infatuated in a positive sense, with like mysticism, like I touch upon that. Maybe take a bit, dial back, get into like just like straight up just psychology, just like that's got nothing to do with mysticism, and it will help you figure out reality more and more. You should try and put all the pieces together, I think, and don't have a myopic sort of approach to it, because that's when you get lost and think you know it all.
Yes, yeah. I think for me, that's probably what I've been I've, as I was saying to you guys before, I've had quite a few messages from people who are experiencing derealization, and I've like, I guess I've experienced a version of derealization, but it's always been positive. I haven't had that feeling of like, I feel like, very much there's a sense of nothing is real, but never a sense of nothing is real and everything is really bad and we're doomed. I've never had that feeling. And so when I've had like messages from people saying like, I really related to this video, would you be able to help me with this problem? I always feel obligated to help. And I've always done a bad job. Like up until this day, I've like messaged like 10 people regarding the subject, and I don't feel like one of them has really like just come out of the exchange and been like, yep, that's what did it for me. So like you were saying, Vivek, I always like defer people now to just go look up Alan Watts or somebody online.
Yeah.
Just follow that rabbit hole and it will help them out a lot. But I also do always feel like it's very hard for me to stop messaging, like not stop messaging, but like to just not reply if I don't feel like they're kind of satisfied with the exchange. Like if they've been like, I need your help, and then I, give them a paragraph on what I think will actually help them, and then they ask me a question because they don't feel satisfied, it's hard for me to end it until they're at a place where I think they're going to be doing better. Other than that, I don't reply to most messages, which is something I actually do want to do more of, but it will have to be in that robotic way. Otherwise, you do just put too much time into it.
You've got to balance it out, haven't you?
Yeah.
So I think that we should, end on one more discussion. I think it's a good time to wrap it up here. It's been a really good discussion. I want to keep going, but I got things to do. Probably getting late for you over there, 11:30. So just let's end with Trip Whip. Now that's just totally off topic, but it goes back to the first topic. What is your favorite psychedelic and your least favorite psychedelic, and why?
My favorite would be LSD, because that's the first. Actually, okay. So my favorite is LSD because it was the first time I ever had that experience that felt like I was in touch with love. And I remember my first LSD trip. I took 2 tabs, and as it was coming on, I just kept thinking to myself, this is so weak. Like, this is really what all the talk is about. Like, this is just like such a weak drug. And then I'm smiling more and more, and I couldn't stop laughing. And I was like, I don't know why I'm like so happy. I don't know why I'm enjoying myself so much. Like, I wanted so much more from this. And then I just went for a walk outside. I was barely hallucinating. I couldn't see, like, nothing really looked different, but it all just looked so beautiful. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, holy, like, this is what it's about. Like, it's just, everything's the same, but it's with love. And it's just changed the way I looked at life. And sure enough, obviously, eventually, as I started tripping more and as I started learning how to let go, I definitely started tripping, much deeper and hallucinating and having visuals and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think LSD for me is just my favorite because it was the first time it pulled me out of my, like, I guess, negative way of looking at life. And my least favorite would be synthetic weed, just because when I started my first ever proper trip was synthetic weed. And it happened because I had some friends over. They invited a stranger over, and he gave me synthetic weed, telling me it was real weed. So, like, being the young guy I was trying to prove myself, I tried to smoke the biggest bowl I could and show everybody how I could handle it really well. And I definitely didn't. I just I had like a ego death, but a very different sort of ego death to what comes on classical psychedelics. It was just, I had no idea what thoughts were, what anything was. I just couldn't understand, like, depth perception. Nothing made sense. And so at one point, like, I remember as I was coming back into my body, I had like a thought and I couldn't understand what that was. Like, it wasn't English, but it was something. And my brain just started breaking and it just started like collapsing on itself. And for whatever reason, I didn't like that trip, although it was really intense, it actually wasn't necessarily negative. And because I was in such a arrogant headspace back then, because the experience was so beyond what I thought was possible to have as a human, I just got addicted to smoking synthetic weed because I wanted to have more of these experiences that was beyond what I, thought was possible. Because I think deep down, I had hope that it would pull me out of my like nihilistic perspective on life. But in the process, I had a lot of trips that were just a bunch of fun, but I had 4 trips that are still to this day the most intense experiences I've ever had. And it was just weird. It was a place that I called the Fear. I found online somebody else had gone through it and they called it the Fear. And it's this, it's just this feeling of fear that is, it's beyond the fear I've felt in bad trips on classical psychedelics. It's fear that is so physically painful. It feels like you're being struck with lightning or like you've been lit on fire and you're just burning. And I remember at the time thinking I'm 1,000% going to die, and not because I felt like my body was dying or that I was having an ego death, just because the experience was so like painful and dark and just like horrible beyond what I can imagine, that I figured I was going to have a heart attack at any moment because it was just too much to bear. And yeah, I mean, that stuff was so addictive. I went through that 4 times before eventually I was able to stop. So definitely synthetic weed for me is my least favorite psychedelic.
I think it's valuable you said about, you knew, like, you had this experience with the synthetic cannabis, and yeah, you know it on a level at the back of your mind, it's like super destructive and it's really negative, but it also allows you to see why these other people that we read into, like their altered state of mind experience is delirium, because it's the only thing that's ever given them that like outside perspective. They never had a psychedelic before. If they had the LSD, it's like, it's a bit, and it's nothingness, it's just colours and hallucinations, and then somehow or other they end up stumbling upon DPH, and then they have a crazy wild experience that, even though it's negative and dark and destructive and it's like killing them, they're still drawn to it because it's a glimpse of the thing that they're really searching for, which is experiencing something beyond the mind. And that's what's great about getting into psychedelics. Coming out from that, you're like, oh right, there's a way to do it safe, and there's a way to use these chemicals that are literally physically safe or safer than doing these things that I know is going to destroy me. And I completely agree. My favorite psychedelic is LSD, because that's the one that's given me my mystical experiences and ego deaths more than most others. And my least favorite is definitely synthetic cannabinoids, because they've made me feel like at hell itself. Oh, it's crazy. Lots of parallels
That is crazy.
between our experiences, Trip Whip. That's why I've always been very fascinated to talk to you over the years. Because, like I said, you two and your mate Tom are like my biggest influences by far. Like me and all my mates have been I've been showing you to my mates for all over these years and everything. And it's just crazy. I remember one time, just a little anecdote, in lockdown when obviously we weren't supposed to be meeting up, but people didn't they? Because then we were so desperate to see each other. I remember my mate picked me up in his car, we went to like this secluded spot and we were smoking a few joints, and I was like, oh, should we just watch like loads of like psychedelic and like drug YouTubers? And so we put up both of your content on and we were just sat there in the car listening to it, and now here we are talking on the Discord. It's mad how life comes around like that. It's fascinating.
Wait, Trip Whip, let me ask you this one thing, because this might answer the question. Do you have any idea what your personality type is? Like, have you ever taken a test for it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to remember what it was.
Are you extrovert or an introvert?
Oh wait. Well, I haven't done. It sounds like I did a different one. I think I'm more introverted than extroverted, I would say.
Okay, yeah, because me and Vivek, he's the extroverted version of me. I'm an introvert. We have the same qualities. He's just that complete opposite in that direction. So maybe that's like why
you're you're not Myers-Briggs. You're INFJ, aren't you? And I'm ENFJ, which is literally just the extrovert version. That's also why we've got a great back and forth. And it's interesting, isn't it? You should definitely take that test. It's fascinating. I know a lot of people scrutinise it and about how it's not scientific, but on a level, just as a novelty, it's interesting because I was like, whoa, this is actually just me. Because if you come up, it categorises you. I was a campaigner, and I thought, I was like, whoa, this is really who I am. Sort of deep down. It's really quite fascinating. But I think I swing back and forth. Like I'm going now, I don't think you're solidly one of them personalities forever. I think it goes back and forth. Sometimes I'm feeling a lot more introverted now. I'm getting a bit of like social burnout, whereas normally I'm literally massive socialite. And now I went out of a day like 2 days ago, and I knew I didn't want to go out and talk to people, but I was on repeat because that's how I usually function. And I went out and I was just not me, and everyone could tell. And I was like, just go, don't even say goodbye to everyone, just go. You want to be at home, just doing your introverted stuff. So for me, I'm a bit like an omnivert.
All right, that was a great discussion today. I can't end the stream myself, so Vivek, I'm gonna do this little outro thing, and then you gotta press the end button. But thank you so much, Trip Whip, for joining. This was actually probably one of the best discussions we've had on this channel, especially in regards to psychedelics, because you're so knowledgeable on it. So anytime in the future you come back on again, we could do a part 2. There's so many topics to discuss about it. But I hope everyone has a good day, good night, good life, whatever. But
also, we'll be back. We'll be back on your channel as of next week or the week after. We just alternated it for this one because connection's been nice and stable this time, even though we had all the technical.
Except that beginning 30 minutes.
I was losing my head. I was losing my head, like scrambling around. I was like, no, it's all over, isn't it? We've been building it up for years and years, and the universe doesn't want it, but we persevered, didn't we? And that's a good life lesson.
Ended up really well, yeah. All right. Hope you guys have a good day, and we'll talk to you next time.